Hey, Larkin Rose here. How do you know what you know? Or I could ask, why do you believe what you believe? Now, you may be thinking, oh, this is just some weird abstract discussion. I don't care about this. But please pay attention, because this is one of the most important things there is. Because this, more than almost anything else, determines what people actually do and how they behave. Because that all depends on what they believe to be true. So again, how do you know what you know? Let's use an example. One of your neighbors comes up to you and says, oh my gosh, have you heard? There's a big scary bear wandering around our town. Now, so this person just said that to you. Do you now know that there is a big scary bear running around your town? No, you don't. You didn't see a bear, you didn't hear a bear, you didn't even see a picture of a bear. You heard somebody tell you that there is a big scary bear around town. That doesn't mean you know it. Now, you can decide whether you think you should believe this guy or think, nah, he's probably making it up or he's mistaken or something. Or maybe you can say neutral. You can say, I don't know whether to believe that or not. I'm not really sure. I don't know. I didn't see anything and I only heard it from this one guy, but who knows? Maybe there is. But you don't know it. You have zero evidence of it. So you go about your life and a little bit later, one of your other neighbors says, have you heard there's a big scary bear around town? And so you go, actually, yeah, I did hear that. And you keep going about your life until a whole bunch of, let's say 10 of your neighbors have told you, have you heard about this big scary bear around town? Okay, now do you know that there's a big scary bear around town? No, you still don't have any evidence. You don't have any evidence, any more evidence than when one person told you. Now, you might decide that it's more worth believing it because you heard it from more people, but you still have no actual evidence of it. You just have people asserting that there's a big scary bear around town. But then we come to another issue, that the thing you're being told, the thing you hear about, and the nature of that has a big impact on whether you believe it. You don't know it, but on whether you believe it. For example, if somebody comes up to you and says, have you heard that there's a butterfly fluttering around town? You might go, I guess that's cool, but whatever, okay. And you may just immediately forget about it, because who cares? It doesn't make any difference to your life. If there's a big scary bear wandering around your town, it might make a difference to your life, might change your behavior. And so the relevance to you is important in you deciding whether to believe it or not, and specifically the threat to you. And if it makes you scared, that will have an effect on you, because if you're in the position of thinking, well, maybe there's a big scary bear wandering around my town, and maybe there isn't, you're probably going to default in the direction of behaving as if there is, or as if there may be. So you may think, well, maybe I won't go for my evening walk around town today, because if there's a big scary bear out, I don't want to get killed. If it's 50-50, your default is not going to be, I'm just going to ignore this, threat and just assume it's not real. So psychologically, because of how our brains work, you're going to give it more credibility, or at least the possibility of credibility, if you might be in danger as a result of it. Now, scientifically, that doesn't make any sense at all. If somebody's saying there's a butterfly around town, and you're going, 50-50 of whether he's telling the truth, or there's a big scary bear around town, factually, you don't know one any more than you know the other one, but if one is scary and poses a possible threat to you, you're going to take it more seriously, and you're more likely to plan as if it might be true. And so back to our scenario, now 10 different people, 10 of your neighbors have told you, yeah, there's a big scary bear around town, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to stay in, and I might either I'm going to go get a gun, or I'm going to make sure my gun is loaded or something, and you talk to your other neighbors and they're like, yeah, we're on the lookout, and we all have our guns by our bedsides at night, and blah, blah, blah. And then you start to wonder, and you realize, wait, none of these people told me if they saw the bear. They just said, have you heard there's a big scary bear around town? So you go back to the first guy and say, did you actually see the bear, or did you hear about it from somewhere else? And he says, oh, Chuck told me about it. Our neighbor Chuck, he told me that he saw the bear. And you go, oh, okay, but you didn't see it. You're taking his word for it. You're believing him. Yeah. And then you go to the second person who told you. It's like, did you see this bear? Oh, no, I heard about it from Chuck. And you go on down the line and you find out all 10 people heard about it from Chuck. Well, now, scientifically speaking, if one guy actually claims to have seen something and have evidence of it, and he tells one person and that one person tells you, that's no less impressive or statistically relevant than if that one guy tells 10 people and they all tell you. It still came from one guy. He could tell 100 people and they could all tell you. It's not any more statistically relevant. There isn't more of a reason to believe it because there were more middlemen. It still came from one guy. So you go, well, I wonder like how big it was, where did he see it, what he was doing? So you go to Chuck and you say, hey Chuck, I hear you like saw a big scary bear around town. He goes, yeah, I'm pretty sure, maybe, I don't know, I was a little bit drunk, but yeah, I think I saw it in these woods over here last night. I was kind of drunk, but it was this big, shaggy, dark brown thing crashing around the trees or running around back there, and I ran inside, but yeah, I definitely saw something. It might have been a bear. You're like, okay, so all the people who asserted this is definitely the case, they all relied on one guy who isn't even sure about that. Like, he isn't at all sure. He kind of thinks it might be. And then you remember, wait a minute, doesn't one of your neighbors own like a humongous dog, a big brown dog? So you go to that neighbor and go, hey, did you know, Chuck's been telling people he saw a big scary bear in the woods. Have you seen that? Because you live like right next to Chuck. It's like, no, I didn't see that. Like, did your dog by any chance get loose last night? He's like, yeah. Sometimes he gets off his leash and he runs around, and we finally got him back. Okay, so was he running around in the woods over there? Like over by Chuck's house? Yeah, but he came back. And we all know he's a perfectly nice, friendly dog, so it's not scary at all. It's like, oh, okay, so probably now you know that in spite of all those people telling you there's a big scary bear around town, there probably isn't. They were probably all wrong. They all just believed one source who was mistaken in his perceptions, which is Chuck. He thought he saw a bear, he admitted he was somewhat drunk, and chances are it was this dog. And so now you still only have secondhand evidence, but now you have testimony that demonstrates Chuck was probably wrong when he said, it's a big bear. And then you find out he didn't even really say for sure, it just sounded like it. Even that has to do with fear, because if Chuck goes around telling people, I saw something, it might have been a big bear, or it might not, I don't know, whatever. People are going to remember the scary part. They're not going to remember the part that would mean that who cares, it doesn't even matter. They're not going to go around telling everybody, hey, have you heard about this thing that doesn't matter at all and is vague and we're not even sure what it was and you don't have to worry at all? No. And that's why gossip is often about things that are like upsetting or scary or make people mad or make people, whatever, because people want to spread stories that other people are interested in. And if you're in danger, people are immediately interested in that. So in our somewhat silly scenario, Chuck saw somebody's dog off the leash and Chuck was slightly drunk, thought it was a bear. Now half the town thinks there's a big scary bear around and they're acting accordingly. And they're all like carrying guns around and trigger happy. And you're like, okay, at some point I might be kind of nervous about this. Maybe I should go let my neighbors know there's no big scary bear. And so you start to do that. You start to go back to your neighbors and explain to them. It was almost certainly Chuck's neighbor, because I went and talked to him. His dog got off the leash. Have you seen his dog? He's huge. He's friendly. He's nice. He's never going to harm anybody. But he's huge. He's the color of a bear. And he admitted his dog got away and was running around those woods. So Chuck was mistaken. But if you go to all those people, they might believe you and they might not. The fact that it may be a threat to them, and they may have gotten to the place that they've convinced themselves that there's a big scary bear in town, may actually make them be reluctant to listen to you explaining to them why, no, there's no bear, and the entire reason everybody thought there was bogus. It was, factually just wrong. And I went and found out for myself what it probably actually was. So there's so many things that come into play in determining what we believe. If something's scary, people tend to believe it, or at least give it enough credibility to take precautions in case it might be true. And if they hear it from a bunch of people, they believe it more, almost automatically, even if all of those people got it from one source. And it turns out the one source was totally wrong. And even if the next day, Chuck comes out and goes, I found out, my neighbor's dog was, out wandering last night because it got off the leash. And it was probably that. It probably wasn't even a bear. So sorry about that. The likelihood of that correction catching up to the rumor in a big neighborhood is very, very low. Because people don't go around saying, hey, have you heard something boring and uneventful and completely insignificant to your life has happened? It's the saying of why a gossip is halfway around the world, an untrue gossip is halfway around the world before the truth even gets its pants on in the morning. Because it doesn't spread like that. If the truth is boring and non-threatening, it's like, whatever. And so you actually see that in the news. You'll see some story where, this scary thing happened, and then the news prints a retraction because, whoops, we got that wrong. And the retraction doesn't nearly spread like the scary news does because people don't care enough, and it doesn't matter to them enough, and they're not like desperately running around telling everybody about the thing that totally doesn't matter. They don't go to all the people they say, have you heard about the bear? And go, never mind about the bear, there wasn't a bear. And so that's just human psychology, because we're not always rational, and we're not always logical, and we don't always rely on evidence. We often fall for emotionalism, and fear, melts our ability to think rationally and to actually understand things. But the last thing I want to harp on ties in with another subject, which is a lot of people aren't even clear about what they actually hear. People are notoriously bad reporters. If several people witness it, like a simple little fender bender traffic accident, they'll often give several different accounts of what they thought happened. And they'll all be trying to be honest. They'll be saying exactly what they really believed happened, and it won't match each other. Because it isn't just about our senses, our memory is unreliable. And, our perception, our perspective warps what we think happened, and our analysis and our guesses, and we fill in the blanks with our brain, and I'm pretty sure he was coming from over there, and somebody else is like, no, he came around this corner, and notoriously eyewitness testimony is horribly unreliable. And that's kind of all we have. We're stuck with that. But if other people believe the eyewitness testimony that's horribly unreliable and assume that, well, if the person's not lying, then I can accept their account of things, then lots of people will believe things that are completely untrue. Not because the first person lied about it, but because they were mistaken and got it wrong. And, gossip does that all over the place. And rumors of, have you heard this? And they, those fly around all over the place, and later you find out, the truth was nothing like that, but the person may have not known that. They may have honestly believed that, and they spread it around. And by the time the boring truth comes out, it doesn't spread. It just sort of goes, because nobody cares, so nobody talks about it. But I want to focus finally on something that's really important, is people, especially when they're scared, they're not even clear about what they heard. For example, if Chuck went around saying, I saw this big thing and it might have been a bear. I was kind of drunk. And even if he puts in the qualifiers that say, I'm not really sure, it could have been something else, but I couldn't think of what else it would be, so my guess is maybe a bear. If people hear that as maybe it's a bear, because that's the scary thing, and don't even specifically hear what he actually told them, and they warp even that. So it's not even just a matter of, do we believe him? Are his perceptions right? It's in the communication from the original source, it already gets mangled. And you've probably heard of the whisper down the lane game, where one person whispers something to somebody and they're supposed to pass it down the lane. By the time it gets to the other end, it bears hardly any resemblance to what it started as, because we're so bad at understanding what other people say and memorizing it and repeating it correctly and getting all the details right. And so it gets mangled, not out of any malice, not out of any attempt to be dishonest, but that's just how we are. We're just imperfect beings, and we're not robots. So many people are unclear about what it is they actually heard, and the scarier it is, the more they're going to repeat it and tell everybody, and the more they're going to alter their own behaviors and go, well, in case this is true, in case there really is a big scary bear wandering around town, I'm going to keep my doors locked, and I'm going to watch out, and I'm not going to go for my walk outside, and I'm going to keep a gun by me, and I'm going to do all these things to prepare for something that may be 100% fictional. Didn't happen at all, it doesn't exist at all, But because you're scared of it maybe being real, you prepare and you worry and you're all anxious and stuff. So I want to jump into one more analogy. People do this about a zillion different things. They have done this about COVID-19 to a degree that is just plain ridiculous and absurd. Believing things when they don't even understand what they're hearing, passing on rumors, continuing to pass on rumors after the original source said, whoopsie, I was way off. It was nowhere near that. For example, early on, the fear-mongering media was saying, this might have a mortality rate of like 5% or 4.7%. And I immediately looked at the numbers and said, no, that's way wrong. That's not how that works at all. The mortality rate is nowhere near that. You're not counting all the people who didn't get tested, and there may be a gazillion of them who had no symptoms. So it isn't that many that percentage of people who get it die. It's something way smaller than that. And sure enough, over time, all the experts came out and say exactly what I said early on, which is, well, actually the mortality rate is way lower. And now the CDC is literally talking about a mortality rate that's about 1/20th of what they initially reported. It's like, well, we were off by a factor of 2,000%. We said it was this big, it was actually that. So whoops, sorry about that. But that isn't scary. So their correction of the scary thing doesn't spread as fast or as far as the dire warning that was completely inaccurate. And they admit now it's completely inaccurate. And a bunch of other things about this, it's the same thing. About whether you can get it from touching surfaces and whether a mask actually does any good, whether asymptomatic people can spread it. A whole bunch of different issues. They've changed their mind a million times. And the scarier version is always what people go, have you heard? Blah, 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 blah. And the version that's like, never mind, it's not nearly that scary, that just doesn't spread around that much because people aren't emotionally attached, so they don't bother saying it. But I want to jump to one more analogy. And I want you to pay close attention because to me, this is a fine example of how people don't know what they're hearing and they don't pay attention enough to actually register factual information. And this is assuming the information they're getting is actually accurate. They still don't even pay attention enough to know what it is they heard. And then they go out and spread something that doesn't even match at all what they heard. So what they heard may have been accurate or inaccurate, but what comes out the other side is way off. And then other people hear the thing that's way off and go, oh my gosh, we have to, panic and all these things. Imagine this. Imagine that there is a hypothetical medical condition. I'm going to call it medical condition X. It's not COVID-19, has nothing to do with that. It's not a virus. It's just medical condition X. Suppose I did a study and I could tell you this, and everything I'm about to tell you is factually true. Imagine all of this is accurate. I'm not getting it wrong. I'm not being dishonest. Imagine that I can truthfully tell you all of the following. 2 months ago, I did some tests and I found 10 people who had medical condition X, I'm going to call it. And then 1 month ago, I tested and I found 100 people. I only found 10 2 months ago. And then 1 month ago, I found 100 people who have medical condition X. And then just yesterday, I tested and I found 1,000 people who had medical condition X. So I found 10 and then 100 and then 1,000. So it was 10 times as much and 10 times as much again when I, tested for medical condition X. Then I thought, I wonder if there's a correlation between like other people. So I went to the people who I found who had medical condition X and I tested the people around them, and almost all of them also had medical condition X. And I was like, holy smokes, okay. So all the people who are around the people who have this medical condition now also have the medical condition. And I thought, I wonder how dangerous this thing is. So I went to the morgue and I said, hey, can you guys test the people who have died in the last month and see if they had, regardless of the cause, see if they had medical condition X. And they get back to me and they said every single person who came into this morgue over the last month had medical condition X. Imagine I reported that all to you and it was all completely true. What do you think that means? What do you think you just heard? Most people would think that they just heard there's this thing called medical condition X, that is exponentially growing. It's increasing. It's spreading all over the place. And it's contagious. If you have it, you're giving it to other people. And it's dangerous. People are dying of this thing. Here's the punchline. Medical condition X was the state of having 10 toes. I happen to have medical condition X because I have 10 toes. There's a high likelihood that you also have medical condition X because you have 10 toes. If 2 months ago I tested 10 people, I would find probably 10 people who had 10 toes or medical condition X. All right, 10 positive cases. And then 1 month ago I tested 101 people. One of them had a lawnmower accident. The other 100 of them had medical condition X, and they all had 10 toes. Was there a change in the number of people who had 10 toes? No. Was there a change in the number of people who I found out for sure had 10 toes? Yep. Went from 10 to 100. And then I did it again yesterday and tested 1,000, let's say 1,002 people. And 2 of them, for some reason, didn't have 10 toes. One had a lawnmower accident, and one of them had a boating accident. And we're missing some toes. The other 1,000 had medical condition X. Is that significant? Is that curve significant? No, it has nothing to do with an increase in the number of people who have 10 toes. It has everything to do with an increase in how many people I checked. And if you don't mention how many people I checked, or what percentage of people had this, then those statistics are completely meaningless. To say I found 10 people who had 10 toes 2 months ago, and then 100 who have 10 toes, and then 1,000. And guess what? If you go test the people who are around people with 10 toes, those other people probably have 10 toes as well. Because almost everybody does. If you assume that that means it's contagious, that, well, the proximity, if you went and tested everybody around those other people who tested positive for medical condition X, having 10 toes, and they had 10 toes too, there must have been a causality there. That must have been why, because they were in proximity to the other people. No, nothing to do with that. They were born with 10 toes, the other people had 10 toes, and guess what? If you go to the morgue, check the people who died, they're probably all gonna have 10 toes. Does that have anything to do with why they died? Nope, not in the slightest. So none of the information I gave you about medical condition X was at all relevant. It didn't mean anything. But so many people, before I explained that medical condition X is having 10 toes, would actually think this thing is spreading, and there's more and more of it, and it's contagious, and it might kill us. None of that is true. But people are so conditioned to worry about scary things that they will take specific information and data, and their brain extrapolates something scary out of it, even if factually there's nothing scary about it at all. It doesn't matter how many people around you have 10 toes. Even if that number changed, it wouldn't matter. That's not going to kill you. And so when people are that easy to deceive and distract and make them all anxious and stressed out, because even if they get accurate information, they don't process it. They don't know what they actually got told. They imagine scary things. And if something might be scary, their brain will jump to that. And that's just a self-preservation thing. It's like, if there might be a scary bear in town, we better be careful. That's true. That actually makes sense. If somebody says there's a butterfly around town, it's like, oh, well, I don't care if that's true or not. I don't have to prepare. I don't have to change my behavior. I don't even have to pay any attention to whether that was true. But if it might be a threat, your brain runs away with you. You imagine the worst. You think either it's true or it might be true. But to be on the safe side, blah, 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 blah. But it makes so many people completely irrational, and we see that in the most dramatically ridiculous way now with COVID-19, with the vast majority of people having no idea what they're even hearing, not even noticing how often the experts have backed up and contradicted themselves on every single point about this thing. Every one. They've changed their mind, and sometimes they change it back. They started by saying, don't wear masks. Normal people don't need to wear masks. It'll actually make it worse. And now they're saying, wear masks. Why do people believe the exact same frickin' people when they say wear masks, and they don't believe it when they said don't wear masks, it's silly and unnecessary? Because that one isn't a threat. They don't have to worry about it. But if it might be a threat if I don't wear a mask, they're going to default in favor of believing the scary thing because they think their life might depend on it. And then you look into the statistics and you realize young, healthy people never had anything to worry about with this thing. Statistically, it's ridiculously trivial. The amount the media has covered this, the amount the government has talked about this, is utterly absurd. It isn't just slightly out of proportion, it's just insane. And eventually, as the raw data and the actual evidence comes out, more and more people are going to realize this was almost 100% hype. Yeah, there's a thing out there that people die of, just like the flu and other things, and it may be even more died of this than the flu. But the percentage of the population that died and the percentage of the population that was ever at any risk from this thing is puny compared to the hype and the fear and the rumor and then government trying to scare people. And so the CDC just came out with a thing admitting not only, hey, the mortality rate is like 0.26%, like 1 in every 4,000 people. And guess what? If you randomly pick 4,000 people in this country, at least one of them is going to be in really crappy health. They're going to be like 95, or they're going to have a crappy immune system. Yeah, they're going to be vulnerable to all sorts of things. All sorts of things may easily finish them off. The flu, a common cold, almost anything. So if something kills 1 in 4,000 people, always, constantly, 1 in 4,000 people is vulnerable to die of almost anything. So when the mortality rate is that low and the CDC finally admitted that, you might as well say 0. Because that level is so statistically worthless and meaningless that the only people who need to give a crap about it are the people who every year, all the time, have to be careful about anything contagious. Because people who are elderly and have really bad immune systems for whatever reason, they always have to be careful about this stuff every year, all the time. And they still do. And they still will after this overhyped lunacy is gone. But when people eventually understand the actual statistics and reality, and it starts to sink in that I'm not saying the disease isn't real, I'm saying it's so statistically tiny by their own numbers, by the government's own numbers, after they change them 100 times, that the fear about this thing and the paranoia and everybody wearing masks and standing 6 feet apart, it's just laughably stupid. Only I can't laugh at it because of the damage that this stupidity has done. Mostly from the government solutions, the shutdowns destroying 40 million people's lives by putting them out of work, and just making everybody scared of everybody. It's not just laughable, it's downright evil. But it comes from the fact that most people are really bad at thinking, they're really bad at understanding what they hear, and they're really bad at assessing what is true and what isn't, and checking from the original source. Why do you say this? Why do you claim this? Where's the actual evidence? Go to Chuck and say, so you saw this bear, where was it? What did it look like? And you find out, oh, so even Chuck admitted, man, it wasn't really what we thought. And all over the place, the experts can say, this might be as bad as, and people will remember the end of the sentence and nothing else. This might have a mortality rate as high as, and they'll remember the scary thing at the end, and they'll say, instead of saying, well, what's the low end? Might it be nothing? Yeah, it might be nothing. And from the beginning, they would give these ranges, and the ranges moved around because mostly they're just making crap up, and they're believing computer models, which is another whole category I won't even get into, where people think, oh, computer models, those must be reliable. Computer models are just somebody decides an algorithm and puts it into a computer. You can make a computer model say literally anything. And if your algorithms are way off, which they were in this case, then your computer model is worthless. It isn't true just because, well, it came out of a computer. Yeah, it came out of a computer after you put in the input, deciding what was going to come out of it. You might as well just write on a piece of paper, everyone be scared, and put it into a computer and take it back out and go, look, the computer said everyone should be scared. It's that stupid. The reliance on computer models is that stupid, as demonstrated by how drastically wrong the initial models were. But anyway, if you take away one thing from this, it's that I hope you make it a point, whenever you hear something scary, first of all, I don't even want you to not default on the side of caution. Like, if you think there might be a scary bear around town, Have a gun nearby. Be careful when you go for a walk. Like, do things that you think may actually, be in favor of your safety. But find out if they actually are. Question your own assumptions. Question the sources. Find out if it really is. If you want to take precautions, fine. But don't just take precautions and then never think about it. Look at the actual evidence. Look up the sources and say, is this something I actually need to be scared of? Because when it comes to this stupid COVID-19, this was never, ever something that the vast majority of us ever needed to be scared of at all. We didn't need to wear stupid masks, made it worse. Didn't need to stand 6 feet apart, made it worse. Didn't need to close shops, made it worse. Didn't need to destroy the economy, made everything way worse. Increased depression, increased all these other problems. I've talked about that in a bunch of other videos. Try to make it a point, especially when you're scared, to go out of your way to try to find the truth, the evidence, not the fear, not the rumor, not the guesses, not the assumptions, the evidence. And often you will find, in fact, almost every damn time you will find, the media and the government love to hype the fear, the possibility of threat, and downplay or just warp the hell out of the actual evidence. And you look into it and you find, I don't really need to worry about that. That was the truth about COVID-19 for almost all of us the whole time. We never needed to worry about it. Never needed to give it a moment's notice. If you happen to be someone who deals with somebody with a really bad immune system, you need to pay attention like you always do every year. The rest of us, this whole thing is just a ridiculous debacle, just a ridiculous overreaction to something that might as well just be fake. Yeah, the disease is real, and it's so tiny, it didn't freaking matter. And I'm going to end with the thing I've said before. A bunch of other people are saying it, and more people are realizing it. If the media hadn't hyped the crap out of this stupid thing, most of you would never have even known it happened. It's that statistically tiny. It's that small a threat to us. If they had never even identified the thing and just said, oh, few more people than usual died of respiratory illnesses this time around. Lots of people die every year of those kinds of things. If they had never said the words COVID-19, you would never have been scared. You would never have even thought there was something to worry about. But they hyped on the fear, and they relied on the fact that most people don't know how to think. They don't know how to assess information. They don't know how to assess evidence. They are driven by fear and emotion. And when you are driven by fear and emotion, you make a very easy target for power-happy bastards. Please stop falling for that shit.